So we're back again. So we were discussing in the video before that the rational decision-making process, at least the version we're going to use, is going to be 4 steps. And we're using version 2, which is define the problem and issue, identify criteria, generate, evaluate alternatives, and implement decision-making. And so we had started off talking about we may have issues that exist, but the root problem or the root issue that we're looking to find, we may not always agree on what the root issue might be. And determining what the root issue or problem might be will determine how we go about solving. And if we don't agree on what the root issue is, we can take different directions to solve, or we can take different directions to come to our major decisions on the matter. And so a lot of times we may have issues or problems, and those are symptomatic issues. Those are symptoms of the real issue or the root issue, which are causing problems in themselves. And maybe we may have to come back and make decisions about those symptoms. However, getting to the root of the matter will help us to make decisions going forward. Let's go to step 2, which now is identify criteria. So identifying criteria. Most problems are, and the term there is a hyphenated term, which is multi-dimensional. So the term is multi-dimensional. Most problems are multi-dimensional, and decision makers must determine what factors should be considered to resolve the problem that they are facing. We talked about that when we talked about step 1, identify the issue or problem. Many times in life, the issue is not just one issue. Many times there's multiple issues. And so multiple issues coming together. And so these multiple issues sometimes have to be combined. And that sometimes even makes problem solving even a little bit more complex, or coming to decision a little bit more complex. And so we really need people who can peel through root issues and understand how issues impact other issues and how we can start making decisions to sort of bring resolutions to what we need to face. So in that case, we say problems are multidimensional. If people were perfectly rational, they will identify all relevant criteria that might influence a decision. So remember, criteria are all the factors we have to take into consideration when making our decision. Those are what criteria are. What are the criteria for making decisions? What are the factors that you consider when you make the decision? And so a lot of times, if we were perfectly rational, we would consider all the relevant criteria. But many times you could come up with a few. And that's why sometimes you have to pause decision making, or many times we involve the involvement and input of other people so that they can probably see things that we may not always see. Or we can get better at our decision making to look at things a little bit more comprehensively, where we consider numerous factors in making the decision. For example, the range of criteria to be considered for an issue might include price, quality, dependability, reputation. You're in an organization, you have to make a decision. And so in making this decision, you may find that you may have to consider a number of things. What's the price we have to pay? Well, price might be a big factor in an organization. What's the quality of the product? Following, how dependable is it going to be? What's the reputation of the product? And a number of things, or service, a number of things we need to be considered before we make a decision. So you may have to go through a host of different characters. You may have a little checklist. It needs to have this, and that, or we need to go through this, and that, and we will want to choose an outcome that is going to give us as multiple criteria met as possible. Once all important criteria are found, the decision makers can or need to recognize that not all factors that impact a decision are equally important to problem resolution. That's another thing as well. So not every factor is very equal to another in terms of criteria. Okay, so let's go back to the example we had here before. So we have to make a decision in an organization. We're going to have some practice this week. You're going to have some practice decisions to do for me. So let's say in an organization, we had to make a decision to purchase something, and they said, okay, you make the decision to purchase it. Okay, and so you said, okay, this is a budget, this is how much we have to do to spend, and we need these criteria, this is what it needs to do. And so you look at price. Obviously price will be very important. All organizations want to save costs and keep their costs as effective as possible so that they won't overspend and they can keep their profitability. All right, so you have price, you don't want to spend too much, but then you want to spend a price that will give you better quality or good quality. What's the dependability, reputation? Let's say you're a company and you have to buy some photocopy machines. And so you have to still figure out what's a brand, what the brand gives you, what are the features. And not all of these criteria will be equally important. Some are more important than the other. Depending on what you want your photocopy machines for, will could determine how you go about choosing. So not all factors that you have to consider are equally important. For some people, it might be more important than others, depending on the location, depending on the type of work that is done. Determine some factors will be given much more precedence than other factors. And so we say when we are considering a decision, not all factors we have to consider to make it are equally important. We rank some of them. We want this as opposed to that. Some people might say color is not important. We don't care about color. That's not an important factor. It might be a factor, but not an important factor in our decision making. And so not all criteria is equally important. Interestingly, even after individuals identify important decision criteria, they may still allow irrelevant factors such as persuasive tactics. The word there is tactics. That would be TACTICS. Tactics, persuasive tactics, or feelings, right? Feelings to influence their decision-making process. And that might be very true. So sometimes people really sacrifice important things, and you'll be surprised. You'll be like, sometimes some of us sit down and we look at, again, important people making decisions, and how we can make a decision. A human being who can see all the facts can bypass every single important fact and say, you know what, I just want to do this today. You know what? Let's just make this. Let me go on a hunch. I feel like we should just do this. And you're like, well, can you define what is that feeling you're feeling? Like, no, I just feel a vibe, but I should just do this. And so, interestingly, that's why we have to put this there. Even though there might be very important factors to consider, human beings can bypass important factors and still allow other irrelevant factors to come and persuade them. Someone say, hey, well, you know what, here what's going on? My friend have a good business and I want to support my friend. And my friend looking for somebody who could give them business. So I will give it to my friend. And you'd be like, wait. But if we went through all the things that we have to consider, your friend might be the best person to give the business to, but as your friend. And so these are sometimes what some people may call irrelevant factors. Now to the person making the decision, it can be really relevant. But you might say, but look, we have some other important factors. Listen, let's do this. And then some people might say, oh, let's say you're talking about governance in a country, and people say corruption. And people say, well, this is my friend, and these are people I have linkages with. And so I can bypass other important criteria and just give it to my friend, because why? It's my friend. And so human beings are being human, and that's what we said way up in the earlies. You will be surprised, and you and I know that many times we came back up here when we said not unimpeded by being human. How many people could really bypass feelings and connections and social ties with other people in order to make decisions that are perfectly rational? Sometimes to make a perfectly rational decision is faceless. It means sometimes you have to tell your friends, your families, people you're good with, I really can't do that. Or I really would not be able to go along that decision making because it's not going to give me the best optimal solution. Some people will sacrifice optimal solutions for social ties. And that happens a lot. You know, in the Caribbean, we have that a lot. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to make different types of decisions. And we know we have relevant criteria that we must consider to make this decision. But we bypass all of that and still make a decision, and other people like, how could you have done that? Well, because we are human. And sometimes we have factors that influence our decision making that we just say, you know what, I just feel to do it. And sometimes you say, how do you know that something shouldn't be done and still do it? Because we have the power of choice. And so this is very interesting when it comes to criteria and what we consider in making decisions. Sometimes we have criteria and we can bypass all of that for very simplified reasoning when we make decision making. But the point we're making is not all criteria is equally important. Also, other problems that may occur in this stage are that people sometimes omit important criteria that should be considered, or sometimes they involve too many unimportant criteria. So sometimes when you're making a decision, there are some factors that we consider that are not important. Well, again, who determines what's important? Many times we determine that ourselves, or if we work within constraints within an organization, the organization could determine what's important. So sometimes we leave out important things. Sometimes we don't think through the decision clearly enough, so we left out some important things. Or sometimes we just involve too many things that are not equally important, or just not as important in the decision. Well, let's talk about that. All that sounds nice in theory. Well, how can we put that to practice? So let's talk about that. So let's give an example that we probably could all relate to. So I'm picking things and we're building up in terms of intensity. So we're taking it up, we're starting, we're building our foundation, and then we're going up. So let's talk about an example that most people can identify because you are in university. So therefore you did choose a school to attend for higher education. So let's say this was our issue to solve. we had a decision to make. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean a problem per se, at least in an adversive sense. But we had to make a decision, and our decision was we had to choose a school for higher education. So we want to identify criteria that we could choose when making decisions. So what may be some criteria? Let's see if we can bring up our trusty page here. Let's see if we come up with some. I'm going to come up, of course, if we were in a classroom setting, I would have the class give me all the criteria and let you tell me some. But I'm going to put 4 criteria here. And in our discussion this week, your duty is to come with another 3. Another 3. All right, another 3. And at the end, we will see if we can make a comprehensive list out of some of the criteria that you came up with. So I'm going to put 4. All right, so let's see. If people are going to choose a school to attend for higher education, some people will want to determine a criteria or factor that they will consider is whether the school is accredited. All right, so that would be a big one. Nice. I'm picking all the ones I think that you will find the most obvious, because I want you to go and think about some other criteria that ordinarily you wouldn't think about. So I'm going to come up with the ones that I think you might find the most obvious. And then I'll give you some to go and think about. Your duty is to come up with 3 criteria that you could consider before you make a decision for higher education, where you attend for higher ed. All right, so some people will determine whether or not the school is accredited or not. All right, some people will determine the type of programs being offered, would make a determination where you choose. These are the kind of things you're going to consider before you choose a school, right? Because you have to make a decision, right? The decision will be a school to attend for higher education. These are the factors that we're going to consider, whether the school is accredited, all right? The type of programs being offered. I'm picking all the ones I think will be the most obvious. I want you to give me some others, right? But I'm going to leave out 1 or 2 that I think you could think about that people may consider. All right, let's say, for instance, okay, so let me put next to program degrees, just to make sure it's clear. Type of degrees being offered, all right? Okay, great. Let's take another one. Some people will determine. I'll leave some obvious ones to you, but you need to come up with 3. Let's say some people may want to determine whether, let me put it this way, how qualified the lecturers or instructors or professors, or I'll use it generally. I'll put it here. How qualified the lecturers, instructors, or professors are at the institution. Okay, I will put 1 more, and you have to come up with 3 more. 3 things people can consider. All right, so let me give you another one that some people consider when they are going to choose a school for higher education. Think about what you considered or your family considered before they chose a school. What factors they consider before choosing a school, or what they will consider before choosing a school. So we go here. An institution where family members attended. Hey. Yeah, some people are like that. Some persons, let me put higher ed institution here. Some institutions, some persons are like that. They want to put it here, higher education. All right. Some families are like that. They like to send their families where other family members have gone. So that's going to be a big criteria for them. We are going to send persons where other family members attended. Attend. So I put attend or attended. Okay, so your duty is to come up with 3 more criteria, and you're going to post that on your discussion for this week. So your discussion for this week is to post 3 more criteria. Now, there are many, As a class, we could come up with about 20 criteria that people can consider when they're looking for schools for higher education. There are lots of things people could consider. Now, you may not have considered it. There are some things that may not even have made your list. However, there are things that people consider when making, right? So you will type up your 3. And I'm going to put it on there for you. Choosing a school to attend for higher education, you'll type 1, 2, and 3 for your discussion this week. You are going to post your 3. Not to respond to anybody else. You're going to post your 3. Now, at the very end, though, you're only going to compile a list of me for as many as 15. So you look at some of the things that your classmates put together, and you'll choose out which ones you want to choose, and you'll compile your list of 15 criteria that you can come up with, because I'm using your classmates to give you help so that you can think about certain things that people could consider. All right, so all you have to post is 3 more, and then we're going to use a compile list at the end. I'm going to have us all compile. I'll give you the instructions, so let's look for the instructions when they come up. Well, so there we have it. So that's 4. Again, we could come up with at least 20 criteria people can consider when choosing a school. But we're using this as an example because as an example that most of us can relate to, because we're in higher ed, and we might be in higher ed again, depending on if we choose to further study. But we again using this example to show that you can use different factors you consider when making a decision. Now, these are the factors we consider before. We haven't made a decision yet. We are just going through the process of things to consider before we make our actual decision. We want to make the point again that not all criteria are equally important. And therefore, if we were to ask each of you what were your criteria, you'll find that each of us may come to different criteria. And we may have situations where relevant criteria affecting the decision can be ranked in terms of importance. So some of us are like, okay, let's narrow it down. Let's narrow down all these things that we could consider into the top 5 or the top 8 or the top 7, as the case may be. All right, so not all criteria is important. Now, this is also an important point I want you to note. I want you to note that even though persons may come to the same conclusion or make a similar decision, I want you to know that doesn't mean that the criteria that they consider are the same. Let me repeat that. Human beings can come to the same conclusion, but the criteria that they chose to consider in coming to that conclusion may not necessarily be the same. So sometimes you can say, oh, well, all of us made the same decision. Let's say you are at USC studying, so we all made a decision to come to USC. But it might be very interesting to note that the criteria, the combination of criteria that we consider to reach at USC may not always be the same for all of us. Very interestingly, we can come up with very different criteria. And so that is why sometimes it's good to investigate why or how people came to their decisions. Because even though they may come to similar decisions, they may not always consider the same criteria. Very important point, and I want you to note that. So that's it for criteria generation and identifying criteria and understanding that not all criteria is the same, and we come up with different criteria in order to make judgments. Step number 3 in the rational decision making process. So we said after we said we come up with step number 2, which is identify criteria. We now have step number 3, which is generate, evaluate alternatives. So let's talk a little bit about that. In this stage, the decision maker should identify all the possible courses of action and evaluate each alternative against the established criteria in step 2. A rational decision maker would generate a list of all possible alternatives that are likely to solve the problem or address the issue and proceed to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of each. All right, so generally speaking, in a perfectly rational process, we will consider all our factors, jot them down. All right, we use the example of higher ed, we'll jot them down. And then we say, okay, this is higher ed. Okay, let's jot them down. And then we will determine, okay, let's go looking for institutions. So alternatives here will be institutions that are offering what we are looking for in higher education, in a school for higher education. So whatever the criteria are, if you're looking for where it's located, if you're looking for what type of programs they offer, you will look to see what you're looking for. And you're looking for alternatives that are going to match that to see if they give you the best outcomes. Fully rational decision makers assess the possible consequences of selecting a given alternative for each of the identified criteria, resulting in a ranking of possible solutions from the least likely to resolve the issue or problem. So we could probably list down a number of higher ed institutions that can generate for us what we're looking for. Now, of course, in our hypothetical example where we were choosing a school for higher education, we could come up with various solutions. If you were in Barbados, you will have a list of higher ed institutions that could or cannot meet your criteria. If you're in Trinidad, you will have a list of institutions that can give you that. If you're in St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent, Antigua, you could have Guyana, you could have a list of schools that can meet the criteria that you're looking for. And you will determine these alternatives. So the alternatives in a case like this, if the idea was choosing a school for higher ed, that would be our step 1. Identify the issue. The issue is to choose a school for higher education. Our criteria will all the things that we're going to consider. Our alternatives would be all different schools that could give us what we're looking for. So we'll go through a number of schools that can give us a list that we're looking for. And then we would now choose out from that list the best alternative. All right, some alternatives wouldn't make the list because they wouldn't meet the criteria that we're looking for. All right, and so We may say, let's say I'm looking for a school abroad. Okay, well, that means all local schools would make your criteria. Let's say you wanted to study in another country. Therefore, local schools would make the criteria because they don't meet what you're looking for. It has been proven that the quality of the final solution can be significantly improved by considering as many alternatives as possible. Right? Of course, if the alternatives exist, we can do that. Of course, the quality of a decision can also improve when we consider criteria very carefully. The better the criteria that we consider in making the decision, and the more criteria we consider relevant criteria, the better the quality of our decision as well, because it makes us really think through the issue. It forces us to think through the issue more. Like, wow, for real, let me think more about this or more about that. And so the more relevant things we think about in making a decision, the better our decision quality can be. Number 4, which is step 4 of the rational decision-making process, implementation. Once the optimal option has been discovered, the final step involves implementing and following up on the solution. Many decisions require the assistance of others, even those who don't participate in the decision to carry them out. So in an organization now, of course, when we make organizational decision making, and we will have quite a bit of that to practice from a managerial perspective coming up in the course later on. Again, many times we have other people who are involved in the decision as well, just not ourselves. Implementation involves getting the commitment of those needed and monitoring to be sure that correct implementation occurs. Studies show that commitment, the word is commitment, studies show that commitment to and implementation of a solution are enhanced when those responsible for the implementation participate in the decision-making process and accept the given solution. So if we want people to be more buy into our decisions, especially if it's going to affect people, more likely than not, when they get a chance to participate in the decision making, they are more willing to buy into the process and support the decision making. All right, support the decision making. Feedback is also an important part of implementation. All right, so feedback, getting feedback on decisions that we made can also be a good role in decision making. And so, very important again, we make the point that more optimal decisions are reached when a rational decision making process is utilized. So many times, again, if people will slow down their decision making, consider as many criteria as possible. And in this class, we're going to do some real practice of stretching our criteria, especially when we have to make important decisions from a managerial perspective. I'm going to be working on stretching that criteria and helping you figure out how you're going to come up with criteria to make your decisions. Yeah, make your decisions. And of course, what I'm going to do for your oral presentations with me, I'm going to send you a case. Or I'll give you a case and I'll ask you to do something for me and then you will have it back. So we're going to do some interesting stuff where you're going to really practice some decision making for me. I will let you go through the assumptions of rational decision making, so I'm letting you going to do that. I'm not going to go through that. You can read that as well. So I'll let you read through the assumptions that the rational decision making process makes. And then I'm going to end up again with the text that we started with, which of you intending to build a tower, set that down first and count the cost, whether you have sufficient to finish it. So which of you have something important to do that you wouldn't sit down and work through that process before you make important decisions? And so there's our summary. There are some of the keywords and so we talked about in actually our lecture in this particular sense. All right, and there's a nice little cartoon here to give you something to chuckle about. And wishing you a very good evening, presuming that you are viewing this lecture during an evening period.